We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Beis Amud Aleph in Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 72a. On the previous Amud, the Brisa said that if a non-Jew lends to a Jew with interest, and then when the Jew wants to pay back the non-Jew, instead a second Jew comes along and says, why don't you just lend me the exact same amount of money? I'll pay you back in the same way that you were going to pay the non-Jew back, meaning I'll pay interest to you, and then you'll pay the non-Jew. So if that entire arrangement is made in front of the non-Jew, it is okay, because when the first Jew lends money to the second Jew, he's really acting essentially as the agent of the non-Jew. But the Gemara asks, there is no agency when it comes to non-Jew, so how does that really work? And so now Ravina answers, even though there is no shlichus, what's actually happening over here is a form of zechia. Essentially, when the second Jew takes the money from the first Jew, he is zoche in that money on behalf of the non-Jew. It's as if the non-Jew has been paid back, and then it's as if the non-Jew has now made a second loan to the second Jew, and that's why it's okay. Ravina continues to explain, we find this by a katan, even though a katan has no shlichus, but islay zechia midrabanan. There is a concept of zechia midrabanan for a katan. Rashi explains Islay Zechia the Tanan. We learned in the Mishnah Zochin Lekatan. It says you can be zoche in something on behalf of a katan beperek mishameis. That's in Baba Basra. Hachanami here also Loshna. There's no difference when it comes to a non-Jew, even though there is no shlichus, there is Zechia. But the Gemara continues Veloi. It's not actually true. What Ravina is saying is not true. By a Jew who's a katan, so Yisrael asi lechalal shlichus. Eventually, this Jew will grow up and he'll be part of the category of shlichus, and that's why there is zechia midrabanan for a katan. You can't apply that to a non-Jew because akum lo asi lechalal shlichus. When it comes to a non-Jew, there is no category of shlichus whatsoever, and therefore there is no zechia as well. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Yisrael shalava mos min hanochri beribis. Let's say a Jew borrows money from a non-Jew for interest, v'zakvan alav b'milva, but then he writes it up as a general loan obligation, meaning to say, he essentially writes up, let's say the loan was for $100, including the ribis, it was $150. They write up a new document that simply says he owes him $150. Then what happens is v'niskayer, then what happens is the non-Jew actually converts. So now it depends. Im kodem sheniskayer, zakvan alav b'milva, if before the conversion they already wrote up the amount of the debt, including the ribis, they wrote that all up as a new debt, so then goves hakaren v'goves ribis. So now he can collect, when he's Jewish, he can collect both of the principal and the interest, because it's not considered interest anymore. It's essentially just considered to be one debt of the $150. However, vim la'achar shenisgayer, but if it was after the conversion, zakvan alav b'milva, that they converted the debt plus the interest into one debt, so then it was already too late. So goves hakaren, he can collect the principal, but since he's now Jewish, he converted ve'eno goves ribis, he's not allowed to collect the interest. And the Brisa continues, V'chein nachri shalava mos miyisrael. The same would be in the opposite. Let's say a non-Jew borrows money from a Jew, beribis, and he borrows the money with interest. V'zakvan alav b'milva, and again, they turn that entire obligation into a loan, essentially, into one obligation. V'niskayer, and he converts. Again, in this case, it's the nachri who is the borrower who is converting. Imad shalom niskayer zakvan alav b'milva. If they turned it into a loan before the conversion, so then goves hakaren v'goves ribis. Again, he can collect the principal and he can collect the interest because it's all one debt. But in but if they did that from after the time of the conversion, so then that's already too late. So goves hakaren, he's allowed to collect the principal, but since there's no interest when it comes to Jews, ve'eno goves ribis, he's not able to collect the ribis. And the Brisa continues, Rabbi Yossi says, Nachri shalav mos miyisrael beribis, if the non-Jew borrowed money from the Jew for interest, bein kach uvein kach, in both situations, it doesn't matter when the conversion took place, goves hakaren v'goves ribis, so then the Jew is allowed to collect both the principal and the interest, meaning to say, even if he converts and only after the conversion they try to reestablish it all as one debt, still, even in that situation, really it seems to be a situation where you're collecting interest from a Jew. Even in that situation, the Jew is allowed to collect interest from the convert. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Huna. Rava said that Rav Chisda said that Rav Huna said, Halacha Rabbi Yossi, the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Again, if the nachri is the borrower, he's going to have to pay the ribis regardless. Amar Rava, Rava says, my time with Rabbi Yossi, what's the reason of Rabbi Yossi? Why does Rabbi Yossi say he has to pay the interest regardless? Kedei shelo yomer, so that people shouldn't say, B'shvil ma'os of Niskayer Zed, that the only reason he converted was because of his money. He didn't want to have to pay interest, so he figures if he converts, he'll be able to avoid paying the interest. So therefore we say, no, you have to pay the interest anyway, so people don't cast aspersions on the conversion. And Rashi explains, V'zokvan ala b'milva, he turns it into a loan. It means to say, la'achar zman, after some time passes, chishev imo ala ribis, he calculates the interest. V'zok ef hakol b'yachar b'milva, he turns it all into a loan. V'chosev lo shtar aleim, and he writes a shtar on that, meaning to say, essentially he lends him, so to speak, that amount of money and says, now you owe me this total amount of money. Kach v'kach ani chayev leploni, I'm chayev such and such to so and so. So in that situation, v'goves aribis, in that situation, he can collect the interest as well. Demishaz the kifa, because once you turn it into a loan, havakagavo, it's really as if it was already collected. Essentially, you're saying you already collected the loan and then relent that amount of money. That's why it's okay in that situation. Bein kach uvein kach hasefa polig. Again, Rabbi Yossi is arguing on the end of the brayse of a time in mefarish v'yazil shelo yomru. The reason is, again, people shouldn't say that's the only reason he converted. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Shtar shekasabo ribis, if you have a document and in the document is written interest, konsen oso, we do impose a fine on the person, v'yeno go v'lo es hakaren v'lo es ribis, he can't collect the principal or the interest. Divrei Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir, that's Rabbi Meir's opinion. V'chachamim omer, but the chachamim say, go ves hakaren v'yeno go ves ribis, he collects the principal, but he does not collect the interest. The Gemara says, b'mai kamiflagi, what are they arguing about? Rabbi Meir sabar kansinan hatera mishum misur. Rabbi Meir says, we impose a fine on that which is mutter because of that which is usr, meaning we impose the fine even on the principal. But the Rabbanan hold lo kansinan hetera mishum isur, we do not impose a fine on that which is mutter because of that which is usr. And the Gemara continues, Tanan Hasam, we learned in a Mishnah over there, this is in Meseches Shvius, Shtare chov hamukdamin psulin, if you have a shtar chov, if you have an obligation of debt which is predated, then it's possible. That essentially means that the date in the contract is before the loan actually took place. V'hamucharin kasher, but let's say it's post-dated, the date is after the loan took place, then it's going to be kosher, that shtar is okay. The Gemara says, Mukdamin amai psulin, why is it that if it's predated, it's possible? Why is it disqualified? Nihida lo gavum izman rishon. Now granted that you can't collect from the first date, the idea over here is that if it's predated, let's say somebody bought property from the borrower, he bought it before the actual loan, but after the date that's on the document, so that could be a problematic situation. Because when the lender comes to collect from the borrower, if the borrower doesn't have money, so we're going to collect from any of the property that there was a lien on, let's say the borrower sold some of his property, you're going to collect from the lakuchos. Now, if you go by the date written on the shtar, which is too early, you might end up collecting from lakuchos who really bought the property before the loan, essentially bought the property before the lien. So that's problematic. But the Gemara says, well, why should that mean that the whole shtar is puzzle? Granted, you can't collect from the first date. Nigvu mizman sheni, just collect from the second date, meaning collect from the proper date, the date of the actual loan. And so the Gemara says, Amr Reb Shimon ben Lakish, Reb Shimon ben Lakish says, b'machlokas shenuya, actually what this Mishnah is teaching would really be a machlokas tanoim. For Rabbi Meir here, and the Mishnah is following Rabbi Meir, that's Rabbi Meir we had above. Rabbi Meir says that we make a knas, we impose a fine on something that is mutter because of something that is usr. So in this case, that's exactly the scenario. If you were to try to collect from the early date, that would be problematic. And Rabbi Meir therefore imposes a fine on the entire document and says the entire document is disqualified. Essentially, this Mishnah follows Rabbi Meir. For Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Yochanan says, Afilu Temer Rabbanan. You could even say it's the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan generally would not impose a fine, but over here, Gezeir, over here, there's a decree, Shema Yigvem Izman Rishon. Maybe he will end up collecting from the first date. That's something we have to be concerned about in this particular case. And Rashi explains Hamukdam, and again, if it's predated, La Milva means to say that the date on the shtar is before the actual loan. So Psulim, it's disqualified. The boy Lemitraf Lakuchos Mizman HaKasabo. The lender will try to collect from the buyers from the time of the date from the date that's actually written in the shtar. V'adayin Lo Hilva. At that point in time, there wasn't a loan yet. Ushtar Lakuchos Kodem La Milva. Really, the document that the buyers have precedes the actual loan. V'zem Motzi Shtarovu Kodem. But this guy takes out his document and the date is earlier. V'hu sheker, that's really a lie. Psulim, it's disqualified. Ve'no toraf min ha-meshubadim, you're not allowed to collect from the chasam meshubadim property with a lien on it. V'afilu min ha-mochel ha-milveh, even if you find property that actually was bought after the loan, you can't collect from that as well. And the reason is, initially the Gemara says it's Rabbi Meir here, it's Rabbi Meir, tekonis hetera ato isura, because he imposes a fine on that which is mutter because of that which is asur. And then the Gemara said an alternative answer, shema yigvem min zman rishon, really it could be we're following the Rabbanan. This was the approach of Rabbi Yochanan as opposed to Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says really you could be following the Rabbanan, but we're concerned maybe he'll collect from the earlier dates. Because some people aren't so careful to think about the fact that when was the actual loan, that they're going to say to the lender, oh, your star actually was predated, and then my purchase actually was before your loan. They're not going to realize to make that claim. That's why we have a concern in this case, and we disqualify the star. And the Gemara continues, There was a person who mortgaged over his orchard to his friend, meaning to say the lender took the orchard as collateral for a loan that he made. And he was on that property, he was consuming produce on that property for 3 years. Now 3 years is generally considered a chazaka. If a person buys a field and he has the field for 3 years, you can use that 3 years of chazaka to prove that you're the owner, even in a situation where you lost the document. And so the lender now said to the borrower, if you sell me this orchard, fine, everything is good. But if you don't sell me the orchard, I'm going to hide the shtar of collateral that says that I have it as a mortgage. And I'm going to say that I actually bought the orchard from you because I've already been there 3 years. I'll win the case. So essentially, he's trying to coerce him. He's trying to force him to sell him the orchard. So Azal kam akni livno katan. So what the borrower did was, he went ahead, he was the real owner of the orchard, and he gave it as a gift to his son that was a minor. V'hadar zavna nehile, and then he sold it to the lender. He sold it to the lender, even though it was no longer his. It really belonged to his son, who was a minor. So the Gemara comments, Zvini vadi lo have zvini. Obviously the sale is nothing. It wasn't even his to sell. He gave it over to his son, who was a minor. But now the issue is that the sale is nothing, so the lender wants to get back the money that he gave for this orchard, and the question is, he's going to produce this shtar, it was sold to him bi'achrayus, so zuze kemilva b'shtar dama, when it comes to the money, is this like a loan with a document, v'govim inachasim mishubadim, and the lender can even collect from property with a lien? Let's say the borrower sold other property, the borrower doesn't have the money, so can he go and get those nechasim mishubadim? Can he get that liened property when he's collecting? Odilma, or maybe milval pedamu. This is really just like a loan that was an oral transaction. It's not considered to be a written one. It's not considered that he has a document. Ve'eno govim in nechasim mishubadim, and he cannot collect from the nechasim mishubadim. And the Gemara says, Amar Abaya, Abaya says, V'lav hainu de Rabbi Yassi. Well, isn't this exactly what Rabbi Yassi taught? The Amar Rabbi Yassi, because Rabbi Yassi said, and Rashi explains, Pardesa again is a kerem, an orchard, Kivishna Atman. So the lender said, I'm going to hide the fact that I'm taking it as collateral. V'yamina l'kuchi biyadi, and I'm just going to say that I bought it. V'yavat shtar ha'mechira, I'll say that the shtar mechira was lost. V'avo mikwa chazaka shel gimel shanim, I'll be able to get the field because I have a chazaka of 3 years. To kuli hai lo matzina l'mizdar b'shtar. We say that people can't necessarily keep their document for more than 3 years. So he's essentially trying to force him to sell him the vineyard. Azal bala kerem, so the owner of the vineyard, the borrower, he goes ahead and akniya b'matana be'edim, he gives it as a gift in front of witnesses, livno katan, to his son that's a minor. Kedei shalotei mechiraso mechira. That way, when he sells it to the lender, it won't be a real sale. Shekashayotzi shtar mechiraso. When this guy, meaning the lender, takes out the shtar of sale, ze yotzi shtar matanaso. The son that's a minor, will take out the shtar matana. V'lo gilo hadavar. He didn't make it known that he actually gave it to his son, and that was a way to avoid this being a real sale. And so then the Gemara's only question was with regards to the zuzi. We know the sale is nothing, but in terms of the mos, shehu tovea mimenu, meaning to say the lender now wants to get his money back because it was a fake sale, shemotzi olav shtar shemachartali karim, because the lender will now take out a document which says there was a sale of the vineyard to him, she'ein shalcha, but it wasn't your vineyard, you sold me a vineyard that wasn't yours, v'kibalta ma'osai, and you accepted my money, v'chasafta li achrayis, and you took responsibility on the sale. The question is, kamilva b'shtar damu, is that similar to a loan with a document, to hakasav le'achrayas, because he wrote up that he's taking responsibility for the sale in the document, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Beis Amud Beis.